want to be there for them, but if they're not willing to show up for themselves, if they're not willing to take accountability and do the work for their own healing, oftentimes there's not a lot we can do. I've had relationships of all varieties in my life where I've had to step away from because the person just wasn't ready to take accountability and step up and do the work for their own life. I've got family members that are like that. Shit, I've got more than one family member that's like that, where I'm just like, dude, this person's destroying their fucking life. And, and with these family members in particular, I've got two that I'm thinking of, but probably more than that if I could really think about it, that they're kind of just destroying themselves their entire life. And we've all taken turns trying to be there for this person and try to help them out. But if they're not willing to do the hard work of healing themselves, there's not really much you can do, right? You can help support people, but you can't heal for them. So I love that point. I think the moment that you're starting to take on other people's problems and be empathetic to the point where you're doing the work for them, that's when I think it becomes dysfunctional. So I want to throw that caveat in there, because oftentimes people who have gone through mental health stuff and are really trying to work on becoming healed and healthy and becoming kind, compassionate people for others, sometimes we can overshoot the goal and we can become codependent or hyper empathetic, as he puts it here, and try to do the work for people. We feel their emotions for them. If they're having a bad day, we want to fix it for them. You can't fix other people's life. You can't make other people heal. You can't even make other people respect you. And so having healthy boundaries while being empathetic is super important.
We want to establish healthy boundaries so we don't over empathize or hyper empathize and then burn out.
Yeah.
We need to be at our emotional best when it really matters.
Real shit. I love that. That's a great point.
This video in part was meant to honor my father and share what I've learned about empathy in the process. Question of the day: do you empathize easily with other people, or do you find it hard to understand and put yourself in their shoes? Feel free to post your comments in that section below. And you may want to look at the other video I mentioned about empathetic listening skills. I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. And I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks, God bless, and I will see you in the next video.
Like, that's an interesting, just random. Here's a link to some country music, y'all. Very cool. People often underestimate the power of silent presence. There's an energy of strength that we give to others just by our willingness to be there. They're great tips, especially for those who struggle to empathize with grief. Yeah. And I think supporting someone through grief too is often the hardest thing, because there's not really anything that we can do to make it better. Like, hey, if I lost, if someone passed away, if I lost a relationship, there's not really any words that you can say that are going to fix that, and being able to just like sit with them in that crappiness is super powerful. So that's honestly the best thing that we can do. This is probably more thing that women do than men, but like, just if someone's crying, sitting there and cry with them, you know what I mean? Probably for guys, it's not a very realistic thing that your guy friends are going to ask you to do very often, right? But being able to like really get in the dirt with someone and just sit with them in it, super powerful. It's honestly the best thing you can do is just be there. So we got another video to watch. I'm going to take a brief restroom break though, and then we can come back and continue watching it. So I will BRB really quickly. All right, y'all, we back. Okay, let's see. So this next video is a TED Talk on compassion and empathy. I think is a really good video. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome back, everybody. Outfit is so just like, she's like, I watched them die, and she's just like in this black freaking like Undertaker outfit, like giving this talk. It's gonna be an odd comment, but I feel like people who have just seen some real shit like this are so cool. They have a perspective that so few of us have in life. Like, that's why I think it's so important to go and travel to a different country than your own, especially one that's less fortunate. I feel like it gives you just so much gratitude and a completely different perspective on life. I think often as Americans, we're all, if you're watching from America, I assume most of you are, we're so used to this like comfort, and we're so entitled to just everything being okay and awesome always, right? We're kind of like, this is a little bit judgmental of me to say, but sometimes we're a little bit coddled children, you know, we're just a little bit spoiled in this country. We take for granted a lot of the great things that we have going on. And then you go to another country where people are just absolutely devastated and living in poverty, and yet like still having the capacity to be happy despite their suffering. It's so just so cool. And I think when you can go and see that kind of stuff, you can't help but be filled with just incredible capacity or compassion and empathy for others. To see people that are far less fortunate than you, and I've experienced this myself working with people and from all walks of life, and often in their worst moments in the mental health industry, and doing my fair bit of traveling. But to see people that are so much worse off than you still find the strength and have the courage to be happy anyway, it's just really inspiring. So I love, she's a little bit of a grim lady, but her story is awesome, man. She's a cool chick. I'm a Native American and Aboriginal. Have trouble seeing the things you see. I'd say I have a different perspective too. Interesting. Blame, I didn't know that about you. Very cool. Have trouble seeing the things you see. I'd say I have a different perspective too. Interesting. Well, I would love to know more about your perspective, especially as someone who's a native, you know? I think, yeah. I feel like I'm just such a student of the human condition. It's so, like, fascinating to me when people come from vastly different backgrounds and have vastly different life experiences. I know that I lived one life and had some experiences that in some ways I was privileged, in other ways I was very disadvantaged. So I wasn't the kid that was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but I also wasn't the kid who grew up in like just complete abject poverty. And I had a lot of crappy stuff happen in my life for sure, but I've had a little bit of a mixed bag. So I'm always like really respectful and fascinated by people who have had different experiences than me, because I've seen a lot of different slices of life. So yeah, I'd be really curious what your perspective is, like on this country or even just in general. I like that perspective. I think it's the same way as like language, right? We all have in us this capacity for language, but we know that if an individual goes through traumatic circumstances in life and is not exposed to language early on, they'll lose the capacity to ever learn language, right? What is it? Is that the book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog? Is that it? But there's been numerous cases of people who have been, trapped in cages and severely neglected their entire life and lost the capacity to develop language as a result, right? So I love that perspective about compassion as well, that it's like we all have this inherent human capacity for compassion. But if you go through enough trauma, those seeds can never be, or can go unwatered, and you can really struggle to have compassion and empathy for people the rest of your life. You know, and the extreme end of the spectrum of that would be something like antisocial personality disorder, narcissism, that sort of thing, right? So yeah, I love that perspective. I think it's really cool. I've never thought of it like that, but that makes total sense from like a developmental psych perspective. I like the moral outrage. I think political correctness can be a huge barrier to compassion sometimes. Oof, man, I feel like we live in such a divided time in the United States in particular. Everyone's got their like side that they're on or whatever. I feel like that's one of the things that I'm really grateful about having like lost an interest in politics. When I was younger and I was in my early mid-20s, I was really like politically engaged and you know, and now I'm a little bit less interested in it, and have really checked out of ascribing myself to a particular side or party or anything like that, because I think it's such a huge barrier to having compassion and empathy for. I would also say that people that are the most compassionate quite often have healthy social support networks as a result of just genuinely being good at navigating relationships with people because they're compassionate and empathetic. And so that makes sense that they would be more resilient, because often people with a lack of social connections really struggle when stressful or negative life events do happen, because they're dealing with it all on their own. She's such a cool old lady. I was like, she looks like she's like the, I don't know if you know wrestling at all, but she's like the female Undertaker with that outfit. But then just the things that she says are so cool. I'm like, oh my god, I'm such a huge fan of this lady. I've never heard of Joan Halifax before, but I'm now officially a fan of hers. That was a cool talk. She's a cool lady. So yeah, that's talking about compassion and empathy for the night. What did you guys think? I feel like I often feel like I struggle to find the right balance in life of that kind of thing. And I've looked back at times and questioned whether I've not been compassionate enough or been too compassionate and haven't stood firm enough in my own boundaries. So it's a thing that I think about often. We talked about